Hello. Thank you for logging into our webinar today. This is Jenny Parks. I also have with me Sarah Apple. Sarah, can you say hello?
Good morning, everybody.
I work for the Midwest Higher Education Compact, and I'm the director of the Midwestern State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement Initiative. Sarah, do you want to tell the folks what you do?
Sure. I am the Academic Programs Manager at the Indiana Commission for Higher Education, and one of my main responsibilities is working with the state complaint system.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, I'm hoping everyone can hear us and that we're all ready to go. This is the first of a series of webinars I will be presenting in my capacity as the Director of Midwestern SARA. So this is your first update for the Midwest region for the fall of 2013. You should look for another webinar that will be a further update in the next, probably February or March. Okay. So let's get started. There's a lot of content today, so I do apologize. I've tried to make the slides very thorough, and I will be going through a lot of the material quickly. Some of it will be review for some of you folks. Please know that as we all begin to come up to speed with more of the status of the project and the details, that the webinars will become more substantive, and there will also be a poll at the end where I'll ask you for the types of webinars that you think will be most helpful to you. So let's start by acknowledging that none of this could be possible without funding from the Lumina Foundation. They have been instrumental in funding the meetings and all of the thinking and all the time necessary to come to the point we've come to with SARA. So thank you, Lumina. Okay. I have a lot of goals for this webinar, and so I thought I would review them quickly up front. Once again, trying to practice some good pedagogy, making sure that people know what they're looking for as it comes at you pretty quickly. So the primary goal for this webinar is to provide all of the interested parties who have logged in and who might watch it in the future with a current understanding and an update of the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement. And what I mean by people at all levels is I have people logged in today at the institutional level, people who work at the state, they work with various organizations, and even in other venues. And by all the sectors, you're going to hear me refer to sectors quite a bit today. I mean the sectors of the concerned higher education decision-making community. And that could be public universities, private nonprofits, private for-profits, community and technical colleges, regulators, legislators, and others. A second goal that I have for the webinar I'm going to fulfill right now, I wanted to give everyone a timeline of the events that are coming up in SARA preparation and implementation. Just so you all know, I was hired September 12th. I came from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, where I was their compliance officer and the person in charge of state authorization. So I really have a deep understanding of it from the ground up, and the process itself is very intimate to me. I also know, therefore, how important it is to move forward with the SARA initiative. So since September 12th, I've had a lot of meetings with different members of the higher education leadership in different states, and this is where we are now. What you can hope to see happen is that by December 2nd, the MSARA applications for states to join SARA and for institutions to join will be on the MEC website. That's also the date that the NC-SARA, the National Council website, launches, and it will also have a lot of the support material, additional support materials, but also many of the ones you're going to see on the MEC website, and we'll do a quick walkthrough of where you find those toward the end. And for example, something more specific, I do have what I'm calling my cross-sector meeting in Iowa on December 5th. Looks like I'm going to have one in Michigan on December 16th, and then I have another one in Wisconsin on the 19th. January 10th, I will be hosting in Chicago an MSARA Regional Forum where I will invite up to 5 people from the sectors in each state to move their state ahead from whatever stage of SARA readiness they're in to the next stage. We hope that by the spring, by February 1st, we hope to have some of the first states who will be applying for SARA membership approved. We're thinking that's going to be Nebraska, North Dakota, and Indiana. And by the spring of 2014, we also hope to have proposed legislation presented in Ohio, Minnesota, Kansas, Iowa, and Illinois, and hopefully even have those pieces of legislation passed so that, again, they can hopefully join SARA before the end of 2014. But the big goal is that by the fall of 14, at least 8 states from the 12 in the MEC region will have joined. We'll continue supporting the efforts of the remaining states, and we will really shift institutional recruitment into high gear at that time. A third goal I have for this webinar is to provide informative and supportive materials and to introduce the new applications. So you would have already received with your webinar sign-up the November 1st final version of the SARA document with the CRAC guidelines attached. If you don't have that, never fear, it will be posted to the website. But that is the actual document, that is the agreement that was certified at November 1st at the National Council to be sufficiently similar to the other regional agreements so that we have a nationwide system of reciprocity. There also should have been an NC SARA information sheet that will also be on the website. And then you will see on the website today, just newly posted, the frequently asked questions answered and coming out of the National Council, and then the general policies coming out of the National Council. And then you will see today that already posted to the website are drafts of the state and institutional applications. I am told that we will have the final versions of those, and they will be available December 2nd. So look for them at that time. And that's what I have down there. The materials to be posted are those final applications, and then a lot of additional materials will be coming onto the website. I'll post an updated timeline of events. I will try to do a monthly update. All of the webinars that I'll be doing will be posted there, including this one, and a number of other helpful documents, not the least of which will be a legislative prompt document that will be coming out of Education Council in Washington. So it will help states get to their to the point where they have a piece of draft legislation that will work for them and enable them to join SARA. And I noticed that it says December 1st on these materials being posted. That's a Sunday, so that is my typo. I apologize. December 2nd is our launch on all those. Okay, my fourth goal for this seminar is to help all of the interested parties at least get more information than they already have, or review and clarify the requirements and parameters of SARA membership and SARA privileges. So just as a real quick summary right here, we'll go into it in more detail in a few minutes. What SARA, the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement, is going to seek to do is to create consistent standards for every institution offering online education that crosses their state boundaries. There will be standards for institutional academic integrity, institutional financial responsibility. There will be consistent triggers for physical presence. Those are the activities that you engage in a state that might trigger the need for full authorization in a state, rather than just the going through the SARA process. We will talk about the consistent standards that are emerging for complaint processing in online education, and that's why I've invited Sarah here today. They have a great system in Indiana, and she's going to give you an idea of what that looks like. There will be consistent standards for data collection and sharing. Currently, we have very little data on online education, and it certainly isn't consistent and able to be used by people in different states. And finally, we will have consistent standards for the accountability for institutional financial catastrophes. Okay, so let's get started. This is the brief review of why we need SARA at all. I apologize to those of you who already know this, but there are people signed in today who are newbies at this. Okay, so we all know that we need to seek authorization in other states where our institution conducts educational activities. And for the purposes of SARA, we're only trying to streamline this process for online education. But this all came about in a sociological context from events in the last 15 years that have changed the nature of our degree programs and our student populations. Degree programs are more diversified and they're more specialized, and our student population is really converting from being a first-year, first-time 18-year-old freshman who lives on campus to being a majority of people who are at different stages in their lives. They're not living on campus. They're not even living in the same state where their institution is. They work full-time. They raise families. They are place-bound. So what this has led to is an exponential growth of the educational options that are offered online. This all seems great until the entrance of certain players into this marketplace, which resulted in inconsistent program quality, aggressive and unscrupulous recruiting, and financially unstable institutions. And as the problems with these types of institutions reached a peak, the U.S. Department of Ed stepped in October of 2010 and published its new program integrity regulations and said, hey, if you want to keep your Title IV, your student aid funding, you need to make sure that you are actually getting authorized in the states where you are doing business, and that also meant that the states actually had to regulate. These laws have always been on the books, and it's always been up to the institutions and the states to take care of these matters, but finally the federal government came in and said, hey, if you guys aren't going to go ahead and do it, because it was largely ignored up to that point, then we are going to kind of put a little carrot here. You get to keep your Title IV funding if you do this. You could lose it if you don't. So here is the first of two diagrams I have that I try to use to describe the problem with the current state authorization process. Currently, institutions seek authorization from every state or territory where they hope to serve students. And this is a very, very complex web of authorizations and interactions. So what I did is I tried to simplify it down to one state, not 57 states and territories, that has only 4 institutions of higher learning, and we don't have any states where there are that few. I think North Dakota might have the fewest at 11, but still, this is a much more streamlined example here. So if you look at the blue state, I'm saying that each of those little circles is an institution of higher learning, and they're each going to offer some online programs outside their state. So let's remember, though, that there are over 4,000 institutions of post-secondary education in the United States. So I'm going to leave it to you to think about how complex this web would look as I walk you through this. So let's say each of those 4 institutions needs to be authorized in all other 57 states and territories. Ideally, if I had been able to fit it on the paper, there would have been 57 lines then coming from each of those little dots. I couldn't manage that. Now, that could be more than 57 lines because in some states you have to get authorized by the program, not just by the university. And in some states, you have to authorize separately do different things depending on the number of students you serve or the number of students at your institution. And then sometimes you have to do something different depending on the revenue you generate. So the lines emanating from each institution, I'm hoping are beginning to, if you can begin to extrapolate, you can see it's just a spider web of constantly changing sets of regulations and authorizations you have to seek. And that, of course, leads to, I'm going to try to use this, here's my little arrow, many costs for institutions and students. So here's my summary, again, conceptually, of those many costs. So we still have our one imaginary state, only 4 institutions, but we're looking at least 228 authorizations, if not more. We're looking at the cost of the initial fees, the renewal fees, the application and fee changes that some states will levy even if only minor changes occur at the institutional or the program level. And that could be anything from an increase in enrollment, an increase in your tuition, or an online instructor moving to a different state. Very small changes can trigger very big needs to amend your application for authorization in another state. There are also tons of person hours devoted at the institutional level to obtain and maintain authorizations. You have to monitor admissions and turn people away if they are not living in a state where you currently have authorization. You have to make sure students don't move. There are a lot of things that you have to do. Obviously, there are students who get turned away and are not able to access the programs that might be most helpful to them. There's also really a lack of data on the participation in online programs across the nation and the number of students who are accessing them. There's a lot of confusion over the jurisdiction to resolve complaints. If you have a complaint against an institution, do you pursue that complaint within the state you live in or in the state where the institution is domiciled? And for some of the larger online institutions, it's really difficult to figure out which state that is. And finally, there is much noncompliance, undercompliance, and all of the associated risks. There's been some good research done by Russ Poulin at WCET with funding from the Sloan Foundation. This is a link to that. You can get an idea of how many institutions around the country in 2012 were doing how much authorizing and how much it was costing them. So here's the solution that we are proposing in the form of SARA. We propose a nationwide system of reciprocity that is administered by the 4 existing regional compacts. The 4 compacts are WICHE, Western Interstate Compact for Higher Education, MEC, Midwest Higher Education Compact, SREB, Southern Regional Educational Board, and NEBI, a New England Board of Higher Education. So notice that this covers all of the states. Notice that the 2 Dakotas are cross-hatched. That's because they belong to both WICHE and to MEC. And notice that we have 3 gray states, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. They have not yet joined compacts. They are contemplating it. There's also the option that they would just possibly join one of the compacts for SARA purposes only, and there are ways to do that. Okay, so here is the much more simplified version of what we hope will happen with the SARA process. Rather than institutions seeking authorizations in every other state to which they are sending educational services, they would seek approval from what we're going to call their home states, which have joined SARA, and then the state agency that they designate there will regulate those institutions with regard to the export of online education across state lines. One of the important concepts to understand with SARA is that state agencies that do authorization of educational services will switch from certifying the import to certifying the export of online education. So suddenly we have a much neater diagram here. We have, again, our same 4 institutions, but they're really only, once SARA is fully up and running, applying to 1 state or territory. It does not change by the number of students in the programs. It does not change by the number of programs, and it does not change by the amount of revenue generated. So there are reduced costs because of this program. First of all, the institution pays 1 fee per year to NC SARA. Those fees will range at first from $2,000 to $6,000 per institution per year, and it will depend on the enrollment of the full-time enrollment, the IPEDS number for the institution. The institution will possibly pay 1 fee or no fee to their home state SARA agency. It will depend on how the state enacts its SARA legislation. For example, in Indiana, there will be no fee because their Commission for Higher Education is funded by an appropriation from the legislature, and they can absorb this cost. In the case of Nebraska, they've passed their legislation to allow them to recover the cost of administering the SARA program, and they started the institutional applications at $300 per year and will be revisiting that depending on whether it costs them more or less to administer their SARA duties. Regulators, as I said, will switch from regulating imports to certifying exports of online education. There will be consistent criteria for participation. There will be fewer students getting turned away from programs because there are states in which it is so difficult to become authorized. There will be consistent and eventually centralized data collection and sharing about online education in the country. There will be a consistent definition and a clear path of complaint resolution. And there will be more consistent compliance. Now, it will take several years for most of the states to join SARA, but we are hoping that by 2016, the majority will have joined, and it will be a very streamlined and efficient process like this. All right. I see that some folks already have some questions coming in. I will quickly answer the first one, but I think I'm going to save most of them for the end. My first question says, does SARA apply to colleges and universities conducting clinical education programs outside the state in which the college and university is located? Yes, absolutely. That's one of the main pieces of it. And if you'll give me a few minutes, we'll get to that point about physical presence triggers. Thank you for that question. All right, moving on. There are important principles, not just elements of SARA, that we have to remember as we discuss this with the people at our institutions and in our legislatures and in our regulatory agencies. First of all, SARA creates consistency. We have a sort of lack of that across the nation as each state does everything differently. And we still want this to be within the control of the states, but we want them voluntarily, and that's a really huge principle of SARA, we want them voluntarily to agree that consistency is desirable. The way that consistency is monitored and guaranteed in the SARA process, we do have a National Council for SARA, and its purpose is to coordinate, to hear appeals, to coordinate financing, and to collect data. There are 22 members. They have the council has regional compact presidents, accreditors, regulators, state government officials, SHEOs, and other members of the higher education community. Another goal of SARA, another principle, is for it to be non-redundant and efficient and to create more compliance. As I said before, it keeps the state's consumer protection role in the higher ed triad strong. We really want to avoid having to have the feds come in and we don't want them to have to step in and make us play nicely together. We want to do that ourselves and make the decisions ourselves. And that is going to necessitate, this is a really big issue here, trust between the states. The states at some point have to begin to trust that if other people are following the SARA process, they are going to be exporting quality online education programs. So here are some key elements in SARA, and I hope this will address the one question we've already had about clinicals and physical presence. Okay, and please note these red numbers here are the pages on the SARA agreement you've already received where the specifics are addressed. So, and one of the things I'm thinking is if you want a more careful walk through the SARA document, which again, it's going to be posted to the website, that is a webinar I will be offering soon. All right. So first of all, there are consistent standards for academic and institutional integrity. First of all, you're going to have national accreditation, and I have linked here to the list of those at the U.S. Department of Education website. You're going to have to follow the Council of Regional Accreditor guidelines on distance education. That's also on the website. It's best practices for online education, and each institution will have to have its senior officer who can sign up for SARA purposes affirm that those are practices that are observed at the institution. It has to be a degree-granting institution. We don't have career or trade schools yet. That is something that will probably be contemplated in the future, but as of yet, it's only degree-granting down to associate's degrees. And you have to meet the legal definition of a post-secondary institution. Second, SARA will have consistent standards for the financial responsibility of the institution. In the case of a public institution, you are assumed to have the financial backing of the state and therefore be financially stable and responsible. If you're a private institution, you're going to have a U.S. Department of Ed score of 1.5 or above on their financial responsibility score, and I have a link for that right here for you. There will be consistent triggers of physical presence, and if you look at pages 7 through 9, of your MSARA document, you're going to see what those are. But you will see that, yes, clinical internships, practica, etc. are covered by the SARA agreement because that's a major issue in online education. There will be consistent data collection and sharing. It will be non-redundant, streamlined, and eventually centralized, we hope within a couple of years. There's already a working group at the National Council who are working on what that data will look like. You can see the types of data, not the exact types, but those that we are considering collecting on page 14. And you should know that we are trying to work with iPads and Clearinghouse to make sure that all of the data is non-redundant and consistent. There will be more consistency and accountability for financial catastrophes. You can see information about that on page 15. And then finally, you're going to see a consistent complaint processing across the nation. It will flow from the institution to the state SARA agency to MSARA. It will exclusively preclude grade disputes and student behavior disputes that would go beyond, that won't go beyond the institutional level. And I wanted to make a comment about the complaint processes. First of all, you can find a lot of information in there on pages 19 and 12 through 15. And I wanted to remind everyone that this type of consistency and centralization of your complaint process is actually something that is required in the program integrity rules coming out of the Department of Ed, and will be part of your Title IV audits in the future. And then the recent work from the Department of Defense on their MOU regarding tuition assistance and the Executive Order 13607 and the Principles of Excellence, that is also calling for centralizing of complaints. So this is the direction everyone is headed in anyway. So it's a good chance with SARA just to get working on it. To that end, I do have a special guest speaker here today, Sarah Apple, who's been instrumental in creating a nice, streamlined, centralized complaint system for the state of Indiana. But before we hear from Sarah, I have a little poll for all of you. So what I want to know is, how familiar are you with the complaint system in your state? Are you very unfamiliar, somewhat unfamiliar, somewhat familiar, or very familiar? I'm going to give everyone a minute to respond there. I want to get an idea from our audience just how many people even know what's available in their state. All right. So as we are getting those responses tallied, I have a couple of questions that have come in. First of all, I wanted to remind everyone that the webinar will be recorded and the PowerPoint will be posted to the website. And the states that are already on board, I do have a state update for the Midwest region toward the end of the presentation, so that will be part of this PowerPoint. But I can tell you the states in the Midwest region that have already passed their legislation are Nebraska, North Dakota, and Indiana. Let's see, I've got a few more coming in there. The website is mhec.org, and again, I'm going to walk you through that at the end. I've got a nice note here from someone saying that it's not that the accreditor has to be recognized by the U.S. Department of Ed, but yes, regional accreditation does meet the standard. Let's see. Got a few more responses coming in. Do we look like we've got them all? All right. So it looks like a full third of you are very unfamiliar with what your state has for a complaint system. And then only about 18%, the lowest set of responses, are very familiar. So again, I see this as I'm working with states as being one of the main places where I need to support the efforts of states in moving forward in creating a new and helping their complaints system come into more compliance for SARA, which will also help it come into compliance for the U.S. Department of Ed and the Department of Defense. Okay, so we're going to turn things over to Sarah Apple now, and she's going to tell you how they did it in Indiana.
Thank you so much, Jenny. The slide that you're seeing now is actually the link to our complaint site. Just feel free to go to that and take a look at it. Next slide, please. So back in 2012, we had an intern who started in March, and he began looking at all of the different complaint procedures at other SHIOs and different education institutions, and kind of took the best of those and sketched out a rough draft of the complaint form that you see on our website. He and Dr. Ken Sauer pretty much finalized it, and then in July of 2012, it was placed on our website and has been there ever since. I arrived at the Commission in September of 2012, so I've been able to kind of see the progression of its use. The intern spent approximately 5 hours a week on the project. He was here from March until June, so this was one of his many projects. In 2013, we are actually in the process of building a comprehensive complaint database to track the status and to collect data. Next slide. Some of the data, before I begin talking about our flow chart, that we definitely want to collect would be information on what schools receive the most complaints, what's the time frame, turnaround time for complaints to be assessed, those types of things. So the slide you have in front of you are the key elements that we use in our flow chart to determine how the complaint process is going to go. Students, concerned parties, parents can make the complaint, but it has to be within this 2-year time frame. And if it's older than that, it stops. We tend to have several different complaints come through. Usually we see some on financial aid. If we see some that are alleged violation of state or a federal law, we send those to the Attorney General's office. And if it's something like discrimination, we definitely direct them to the Indiana Civil Rights Commission because those are things that we don't deal with. The financial aid matter is something that is housed, when they have complaints about financial aid, that is housed at another part of the Commission for Higher Education, so they handle those with the financial aid. But our office does the public, independent, and proprietary colleges here in Indiana and elsewhere. Once we receive the complaint form, the staff member checks to ensure that the information is complete. We do not take anonymous complaints because that's not a way to do any follow-up or kind of come to any resolution. But we really also make sure that the student or the person who's filing the complaint has gone through the institutional process. Some students like to bypass the process on their campus and just come straight to us, but we always make sure that, no, before you come to us, you need to work with your institution. So we're very careful about making sure that they understand that there is a process out there. So once we receive a copy of the complaint and any supporting information, we send it to the institution for which the complaint has been filed. So, for example, if there was a complaint we received, we would send it to Indiana University Bloomington, and then they would have 3 weeks to send us a written response. If it's the University of Arizona, for example, we would send it to the correct person at the University of Arizona. And that's how our complaint process will fit in nicely with SARA. We'll be tracking, of course, with our database where these institutions are. And there's not a big difference between institutions in Indiana and outside of the state. They all get the same complaint process flow. And once the complaint is received and we look at the information from the institution, the staff will render a determination in the case and what, if any, additional steps or any follow-up need to be taken. And here's where the difference is with our proprietary institutions. If it is of a proprietary nature and the student disagrees with the decision, that actually can go to an attorney law judge that is on staff, and they hear the complaint and they render a decision, and that decision has to go to the board for proprietary education and voted on. And it is possible that the board determines that the ALJ's ruling was not in the best interest of the student, or they had some issue with that, and then they can change that outcome by a majority vote. But again, that's only currently for our proprietary institutions. State institutions, they stop at the staff members rendering a decision. Next slide, please. So these are some screenshots that show our student complaints process, the different steps students have to go through. We make sure that we tell them up front where to go if they feel like state or federal law has been violated, if it's a discriminatory manner. We want to make sure that we get them to the right folks. Next slide, please. So these are some of the fields that we require. This isn't the entire complaint form, but as you can see, it's pretty self-explanatory. One thing that we also have on hand are hard copies of our complaint form. Sometimes we do have students who do not have access to internet, And so we will send them a hard copy of the complaint form in the mail and just do the same process. Next slide, please. So earlier I had talked about this new database that we're creating. And in order to get the biggest bang for our buck for data, we decided to kind of come together and develop a complaint code system so that when we enter it into the database, which will be in Access, you can type in the student's information and what their complaint is. Instead of typing it all out, you can put 4.2, which of course we don't handle, but we still record it as something that we look at. It could be transfer, 13.1. A student might have had difficulty transferring credits from a 2-year private in-state to a 4-year private, and they're complaining to us about it. So this document is definitely in the works and will be included in our big database. Next slide, please.
Okay. Did you have more you wanted to add, Sarah?
No, I think the one thing that I would like to definitely say is when we get this database up and running, it's going to be wonderful for tracking and for data collection.
Yes, well, absolutely, and it gives people an idea of what's possible. There are a few other states that have some really great centralized complaint systems too, and I'm going to be hopefully putting a PowerPoint together of those types of places and the stages they've gone through to get there. So thank you. Now I do have another poll for you guys. So having looked at what Sarah and the folks in Indiana have been able to accomplish, I'm wondering if you can go ahead and give me some responses to this. You can respond to more than one here. But what is the status of your state student complaint system? Is it centralized, feeding to one agency, fully online, user-friendly, covers all sectors? Or is it only at the institutional level? Do you have to have several agencies that resolve complaints? Is it difficult to use? Is it not, or only partially online? Does it produce organized data? Does it produce little, no, or poor data? So I'm going to let you guys answer these while I answer verbally some of the questions that have been coming through. First of all, regarding complaint systems, I did want to reiterate there are a lot of people concerned about this. Student behavior issues, grade issues of that nature, those still remain at the institutional level. Those do not ever make their way up to the beyond the institutional level to other entities in the state or even other entities in the region. So that's an important piece to remember. We were also asked, will the links that are embedded in this PowerPoint be active in the version that you download from the website? Yes, indeed. Will you be able to join SARA in one region and automatically be able to access states in other regions that have joined SARA? Yes, absolutely. That's why it's nationwide. That's why it's fully reciprocal. And there are a lot of more questions about the clinical components, the clinical placement components of SARA, and there are a few issues there. So let's say you're in a nursing program in one state and you are living in a second state. You are allowed then to go into a clinical placement in your state under SARA and not trigger a need for authorization. However, at this time, SARA does not handle any of the licensing requirements. What it does require is that if an institution is offering any type of online program across state lines under SARA, it has to do one of three things quite specifically, and this will be monitored. Number one, it has to go ahead and find out, that institution has to find out if its program that requires licensure in other places meets the licensing requirements in other states, and post that to, the students have to be informed in their application process on their website. That's one choice that the institution has. So yes, we offer a nursing program, and yes, it meets the requirements for licensure in your state. The second choice an institution has under these circumstances is to say, we offer the nursing program in your state, we've examined it, and it doesn't meet the licensing requirements, just so you know. Third, the institution can also say, we offer this program, we have been unable to determine if it meets licensing requirements in your state, so you will need to figure that out on your own. but it is right up there. It has to be prominent. It has to be the student has to be notified before the student enrolls in the program. And then one other question came across regarding if you are doing, maybe you do all of your work in-state or online in-state, but your clinical placement is going to be in another state. That's iffy. I know in the case of physicians, generally they've graduated and their clinical placements, their residencies, internships will be affiliated not with the institution after that, but with the healthcare organization. But perhaps we can get into this a little bit more. I am going to offer a webinar where we walk more specifically through the scenarios and the specifics. But if the online education is offered across state lines, then the accompanying internship is also covered by SARA. Okay, so are we good? Let's see. Oh, okay. So the bulk of you have, from what you're telling me, have only institutional level complaint programs. But, all right, a little over a fourth does have a complaint system that feeds through one agency. Oh, we're still, well, why don't we wait for a moment and watch the bars change? Let me see if there are any other important questions. Here it's being asked, if a state chooses not to join SARA, will states that are in SARA in turn refuse those states' institution authorization to offer online courses? No. Let's say your state doesn't join SARA. It can still authorize institutions under its old system, and likewise, there will always remain a parallel system of authorization that was always there for non-SARA states and for institutions that perhaps aren't degree granting or institutions that are conducting other types of activities that do still trigger the need for full authorization or approval. Okay. All right. Well, I want to look at this data real quick. All right. Very few of you, I'm noticing, have a state complaint system that produces organized, meaningful data. You've got several agencies resolving. Yeah, we need to move. I put the choices that were less desirable under the SARA process toward the bottom, and the ones that were more desirable toward the top. So what we would want to see is greater responses at the top, where things would feed to one agency. They would be fully online. They'd be user-friendly. They would cover all sectors. And so, okay, that gives you a good idea of where current state complaint systems are. Okay, let's go to our next. Okay. Oh, that was the Indiana. That was it. I'm sorry, Sarah. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? We got our poll out of order. Go ahead.
That's all right. So I talked about the collecting of data, and these are some of the reports that we're looking to be able to run and from capturing that information. We want to see by date range. Do we have more complaints at the beginning of the academic year, maybe during midterms or finals, fall versus spring, maybe it's a summer term. We want to see by open and close date, so when it was assigned to somebody and then when the case was actually closed. We also want to keep track, we have been keeping track, but this will help us all in one system, track those complaints that have been forwarded to our Student Financial Aid Office, to the Governor's Office, and Office of the Attorney General. And we also want to track the outcome. Was it in favor of the students or the institution, or was there something else that was the outcome? And then, of course, track the numbers sent to the ALJ for review, and then coming from that, the number sent to the Board for Proprietary Education Commission for hearing. So those are just a sample of the reports that we'll be able to pull once we get our database up and completed.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so here, let's go to our next slide. We have a lot of questions coming in, so I want to get through the bulk of this information and make sure that we can get to some of your questions. Okay, so here's a state update for the MEC states, because a lot of you have been asking about that. So in Illinois, there have been talking points that have been crafted at the Illinois Board of Higher Education, they have been submitted to the governor's office, and those are being discussed currently. They might, I think the hope is that that might become part of the governor's legislative package, or it might become its own, and I will update these statuses as quickly as I can, but it's at least a month at a time. I believe Indiana will be seeking to submit its application. I have January 1st there, but I think they're going to be ready by December 2nd. Iowa, I'm having my big cross-sector meeting in Des Moines there on December 5th. We have a lot of people coming to that, and Iowa seems to be moving ahead quite nicely. Kansas, SARA was the main topic at the Academic Affairs Subcommittee of the Board of Regents on November 20th. It's been recommended for further study, but again, we're still on schedule probably for it to go to the legislature in the spring. Michigan, I do believe I'm finalizing a date of December 16th to be my cross-sector meeting there. Minnesota, they're drafting legislation and have a placeholder in the spring, so that should get passed this spring. Missouri, I will be scheduling a cross-sector meeting in January. Nebraska should be submitting its application. It could be in December, January. They're pretty much ready to go. North Dakota, similar. Ohio, I did a cross-sector meeting on October 29th, and they're in the process of drafting legislation. South Dakota is actually leaning toward joining SARA, but MEC will continue to support them as much as they need with any of our materials. And I did want to mention there will be a lot more materials coming to the website soon. And Wisconsin is having its cross-sector meeting on December 19th. And again, we'll have all of the major players there at the table and move ahead in the process. So I have another poll for you guys. What would you describe as your level of awareness of the status of SARA work in your state? Please just choose one of these. And while we're tallying those, I will see if there's more questions I can answer. Some of the questions I'm going to be leaving to the end. So, but the quick ones I will try to answer right now. I've been asked for the statutory citation for the legal authority to deal with complaints in Indiana. Is that something you have, Sarah? Can you provide that?
Yes, absolutely. I don't have it right with me, but maybe that's something that we could link to on the website.
Absolutely. We will link to that on the website. Does Illinois have a state complaint system? I am not as thoroughly aware of their system as I am with some of the others. So again, I'm going to be trying to do a webinar, I hope, that will be about the creation of a more centralized complaint system. All right, so here's a question. You've noted your belief that there may be a lack of enforcement in some states. How would you address the concerns of a state that believes it has a good consumer protection system that may need to cede authority on complaints to other states that may not be as protective of state residents and students? I do have well, first of all, this creates consistency and it creates a clear path of resolution and adjudication. A state that joins SARA is not giving up any of its consumer protection abilities and statutes. It is simply providing a consistent path and a recommended voluntary path for complaints about institutions. Now remember, for SARA purposes, this will not be it will not be the residents of your state. It will be the residents of other states lodging complaints or concerns about institutions in your state. Now, if you're worried then about your students attending institutions in other SARA states, please note that they have that same set of safeguards and expectations there. That isn't currently the case always. So I like the idea that this creates more consistency and it creates a communication system and a shared, eventually a shared set of complaint definitions and categories. Okay, let's take a look. Describe your level of awareness for the status of SARA work in your state. And it does look like people have a general idea. That's good. But we do still have almost, we're getting close to 20% who have almost no idea. or no idea. And together, what do we have there? 35% who really don't have a lot of information. So I'm hoping this webinar will help. And if I do these once a quarter, hopefully they will help a great deal. I'm really intrigued to see that about 27% of you know exactly what's going on, and that almost 40% of you have a general idea. So hopefully we'll move you from the general to the exactly category today, and move you from the no idea to a general idea today. So that would be my goal. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, well, I wanted to let you know right now, and again, you'll have this with when you download it. These are the people with whom I have been working. I'm sure I have forgotten someone, and I apologize. But these are the key players in each of your states so far that I've been to whom I've been speaking about SARA and working on matters with them. So I apologize to anyone I've left out. Please let me know. I'll add you to the list. And this will be posted to the website, not only in the form of the webinar, but also as its own updated document so that people can always try to find out who's doing what in their states. And I'm not going to go through those individually. But I am going to poll you. So did you know at least the names of 2 SARA leaders in your state prior to me just giving them to you? Go ahead and let me know about that, and I'll answer some questions. So we have a question. So other than stating whether you meet the other state's licensure requirements, it does matter if more than a state agency has put forth the criteria regulating didactic and clinical aspects of the program. Is it correct that the totality of the program is covered by the agreement? Okay. That's one I'm going to have to, that's from Lisa. Lisa, that's one I'm going to have us talk more specifically about your circumstance and probably add that to my What If webinar, which, again, I'll do in the spring. So please contact me individually about that. For Danielle, would you be able to see the talking points for Illinois? You could contact Dan Cohen about that. I have them, but I'm not at liberty to share them. Let's see. How does the accreditor's complaint process fit in, for example, through HLC? Well, accreditor's complaint process is a little bit different than the complaint process for SARA in that it's going to cover different issues. Accreditors are really going to be about other resources at the university, curriculum, etc. Most of the SARA complaints we are anticipating are going to be about the functional health of the institution and the way it does its online work. We do work with HLC, and we'll be continuing to create more data sharing and a closer alignment with HLC and other accreditors. So, okay, here we go. We're getting some from Alan Contreras at National SARA. He's saying HLC has indicated that it will not handle student consumer protection complaints. So there you go. Yeah, the consumer protection type complaints are not the ones HLC deals with. So, all right. Okay. Yes, someone was saying it would be nice if you could see the questions as they're that others are typing, and I'm not sure we're able to share that with you. I'm sorry. We will work on figuring that out for future webinars. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to this poll. Did you know the names of at least 2 SARA leaders in your state? Yes, that's good. A lot of you did, but still there were a lot who didn't. So I'm hoping that was helpful, and I'm hoping again that that the no category is much lower in the next round of webinars. Okay, so we're going to review what we've been so far. I've tried to give you an update and an overview. I realize that there are a lot of questions still and some more specific pieces of SARA you need to know about. I've given you a timeline of what I know will be going on, and I will continue to update that timeline at the MEC website, which I will walk you through in a moment. I've provided materials and indicated the materials that will be posted soon to the MEC website. I've summarized the key elements and principles for you of SARA, but again, I will be doing a more in-depth treatment of the document and the agreement. And now I have goal number 5, which I will be getting to in a minute. But first, and that's that I need some help from the states and the institutions to do my work. But let's go to the next. This is where I can tell you about the MEC website. So that's it, www.mec.org. And you'll land on this page. And up here, it's pretty small, but you can see that it says programs there. So you would click on programs, and under programs you would click on state authorization reciprocity. This would come up, and then under state authorization reciprocity there's going to be a note from me. And then there will be over here in the left-hand column all of the documents that you would be able to access. And again, this is just a fraction of them that we have up there today. I apologize. I've been traveling like mad, and my very lovely helper here, with whom I could not accomplish any of this, Mary Robertson, has been traveling as well. So be looking for these to be up very, very shortly, a much more comprehensive set of these. So that's the website, and that's how within the website you go website, program, state authorization, document. All right. So this is what I need help from the institutions. I need institutions who are willing, people at institutions who are willing, to log on to the website and download this PDF. This is a questionnaire about your current practices in state authorization reciprocity. Now, mind you, I referred earlier to Russ Poulin's survey about current state authorization practices, and that is a quantitative survey, and I believe he is launching it again in mid-January. But this is a qualitative survey where I am asking for a richer portrait, a deeper portrait, just at your institution, of the number of people, the number of students on whom there is an impact because of the difficulty of this process. I liken the state authorization process to trying to wrap rubber bands around Jell-O. Well, this is where you would get to wax poetic about that process. It's a 3-page document, and you don't have to fill it out, obviously, but all of the information about returning it and whether you want your institutional information redacted, etc., is on there. My contact information is up here, but I would be using this information to help me as I am creating dossiers to go to different states and convince legislators of the need to join SARA. Okay. So, and it's currently not a fillable PDF, but we will be changing that soon. Okay. So here's your final poll. Which of the following webinars would you find most helpful? Please go ahead and let me know, because that's the one I'll do next. And let's see, I'll look at a few more questions. I have one from Bruce. Are state regulators accepting and embracing SARA? Are there potential legislative issues? In general, I have found the regulators, they were part of the early process of crafting the original incarnation of SARA, which was much lengthier and much more detailed and was going to be difficult to get past legislators. However, the regulators I have spoken to are extremely conscientious and thoughtful people about these matters and really have the most detailed knowledge of them. And they are the ones who have the best criticisms and the best recommendations. I think I have yet to meet a state regulator who does not see the potential for SARA to be a net gain, in that things will be consistent, they will be transparent, and they will be streamlined. So there might be minor concerns, but in general there is overall support from the people I've been talking to. Okay. All right. So which of the following webinars would be most helpful? Coaching on the institutional application, coaching for state-level readiness, and more details about SARA itself. Okay, and ideas for working on your state complaint process. Okay, well, there's sizable interest in all those categories, so I will definitely, the coaching for the institutional application, I think I'll do after I do the coaching for state readiness, simply because the one is moot without the other. But I will But I will get working on all of these as soon as possible and include all of you on the invitation to these. Okay, so I have my next slide is basically contact information. So there's my contact information here at MEC. We also have a national director, Marshall Hill, who is the brains of the organization at the national level. You can contact him. Many of the things I have in my webinar today were drawn directly from another really great webinar that will be posted on their website at the NC SARA website on December 2nd too. And I will be providing more information for Sarah Apple. Sorry I didn't put you here, Sarah. I didn't know if you wanted that much exposure. So
that's fine, thank you.
You're welcome. So I think now we're at the end. We're at 10:45. Those of you who have to log off, I totally understand. Those of you who don't, we have another 15 minutes here where I'm going to be answering as many of the questions as I can. And then I encourage any of you to go ahead and contact me in the meantime with your other questions. I'm happy to talk to you, conference call with your organizations, and I hope to be piggybacking on a lot of meetings in the spring and seeing a lot of legislators. Okay, so we have two things. We have questions and we have the ability to raise a hand. Okay, so Gretchen, your hand is raised. Are we able to hear Gretchen's voice, or are we going to have something typed by Gretchen? Okay. Also, we have Marshall Hill and Alan Contreras on the line from Boulder, from NC SARA, to answer questions. So let's just go to the unanswered questions. If they're one we can answer, we'll answer. If we can't, then we'll get back to you on them. Okay. So let's see. Larry Isaac, president of MEC, wanted me to make the point that, just in case anyone had misunderstood, that institutions in non-participating SARA states will still be required to seek authorization state by state in the old way. And in fact, even if you're in a SARA state, if you're trying to offer services in a non-SARA state, you still have to go through the old process. Okay. So what if a state decides not to participate? Okay, so if a state decides not to participate in SARA, then all the institutions in that state also cannot participate, and you just continue under the old system everywhere else. All right, let's look for another question. Someone had asked, why is South Dakota joining WICHE versus MEC? It's just that they were a member of WICHE first, and I also think that because North and South Dakota belong to both, there's kind of a gentleman's agreement there that one gets one state, one gets the other. How do you sign up for the cross-sector meeting in Iowa? You email me. I will get you the information. Could SARA potentially extend to brick-and-mortar campuses in a SARA state that have a limited physical presence in another SARA state? That is not one of the long-term goals we have discussed, though, I guess anything far enough down the road is an option. Some of the things that are coming in SARA, we hope in the next couple of years, are a centralized data system, a centralized complaint system, and beginning to work a little bit more on that issue of licensure. Those are the things that I've heard mentioned prominently. Let's see. If our state signs on to SARA in spring 2014 and we join as an institution, we're good to offer online programs in all SARA partner states. Yes, that's true. Is it possible to see a list of the attendees? I am interested in building a network of colleagues. Yes, absolutely. I think we can do that. Send me an email and remind me, please. All right. Do you know of any states that have already declared that they will not participate? I would not say we have some that have declared, but we do have this. We all have that same set of states where we find it rather difficult to obtain authorization. Massachusetts being the first one that comes to mind. I would say they are the least enthusiastic about SARA and don't have any short-term plans, to my knowledge, to join. But I am not the NEBI coordinator. I don't know if Kylie's on the line today or not. She might chime in on that. I believe people from SREB in Whittier there, maybe they could chime in and let me know if there are some in their region who have really said, no, this is not for us, though we know that could change and is likely to change in the future. I can tell you there are no states like that in the Midwest. I have the easiest job of the 4 regional coordinators in that respect. Are there any plans for meeting in Minnesota again? I imagine there will be. We did our big meeting here at the MAC office on November 5th, and I know my representatives from Minnesota who will attend the January 10th forum in Chicago. But then there will be meetings in Minnesota in the spring as we move toward making a presentation to the legislature, and then probably some meetings where I help institutions get through their application process. And I'll probably have meetings like that in most of the states in 2014 as well. How much change or tweaking will be allowed in the agreement to be signed by the state or by the institutions? We're not tweaking at this point. We are the drafts that I have on my website are drafts, and I think there will only be minor, I want to say even like formatting or clarification changes. At this point, we need to move forward, so the agreements, the documents, and the applications are as they are for the foreseeable future. Though, of course, this is going to be a living document. Marshall Hill likes to compare it to the Constitution. At this point, we need to get it ratified, and as we practice and as more states join, of course, there will be the ability to amend. But right now, that ability is not open. Let's see. What can institutions do to influence their state to become a SARA state? Well, the first thing you can do is to help me collect in that document I referred to testimonials and information that is illustrative to legislators who are wholly unfamiliar, many are wholly unfamiliar with this process, so that they get a rich portrait of how much trouble it is and how costly it is. The other thing you can do is lend effort to the people in your state who are your leaders, and I can get you connected with them, and they will definitely have ideas for how you can help them. What advantages are there to attending the Iowa cross-sector meeting? I'm trying to decide if that is something I want to do. Well, the cross-sector meeting is basically for leaders in the educational community. What I will do, though, is I haven't figured this out yet, but there might be the ability to broadcast it. The cross-sector meeting there will just be where we are deciding exactly what are the next steps to take in Iowa. So it wouldn't necessarily be something that someone at an institutional level needs to attend. This is going to be Karen Mischak from the Iowa Student Aid Commission. This is going to be Bob Donnelly from the Board of Regents. It's going to be M.J. Dolan from the community colleges, and people like that. So you can certainly contact me, and I can see if I have any. I think I have slots for 25 people in the room. So, but we're looking for people who represent probably more than one institution and or represent a very specific portion of the online education community in Iowa. All right, SREB wants to be optimistic about all states eventually joining in 2 to 3 years, according to Mary Larson. Yay! Okay, so that's good. So back to that question of states that have declared they won't join. Why would a state like Massachusetts not want to join SARA? There are states that don't want to join, at least at this point, because there are a couple of reasons. First of all, in Massachusetts, they make a lot of money off of regulating, and in fact, they make enough money that they can actually fund other parts of their Department of Education. So there's a revenue concern. There are the employment of the people who do the regulating. There is also trying to eliminate competition for in-state institutions. And I'm not saying that's what is happening in Massachusetts, but that's been a concern in other places. And then, believe it or not, there are states and regulators in places who believe that they do it better than anyone else anywhere else, and they just haven't gotten to that level of trusting that other states might be able to follow the SARA guidelines and do a good, decent job of exporting online education. Let's see. All right. For institutions doing interinstitutional collaborative online courses where the student's home institution is the one giving credit, is their interstate authorization relevant? Okay, so you're part of a consortium or a collaborative, and the student lives in the same state. It's a multi-state collaborative, but the student is receiving online education in the same state where the institution is domiciled. That doesn't even fall under SARA. You're allowed to do that without anything. Now, states, if you have a set of if you're in a consortium of institutions across state lines, basically the way that you kind of anchor the SARA accountability is where the degree is granted. And so the institution where the degree is granted, out of which the degree is granted, is the one that is important for SARA purposes, and therefore, and also where the student lives. If those two are SARA states and are SARA states, then we're fine. That would be one. If you wanted to call me, I'll add it to my what-if scenarios and add it to that particular presentation in the spring. Okay, let's see. We've got not much more time for questions. What's this one? Are the upcoming cross-sector meetings open to the public? Call me about those, because I haven't really clarified that yet. I was trying to make everyone more aware that those meetings are coming, and trying to get people from different sectors. I don't have the ability, I'm not set up in any of those right now for a mass audience, but I do want to keep people aware of the content of those presentations and meetings and the results of those meetings. So that's a good one to go ahead and call or email me on. Okay. Alan Contreras is chiming in with that consortial clarification. He says, in most cases, the key SARA institution that we would be concerned with is the one where the student transcript comes from. So, and usually that's where the degree comes from, but wherever the transcript will be kept and issued and kept, that's the one that you would be concerned with for SARA purposes in an online degree that comes through a consortial agreement. Do I have a deadline for submitting the questionnaire? I've asked for, I believe, December 31st on the questionnaire, but I would still accept it well into the spring. I know we're going into a busy season. If I have it by December 31st, then I can begin to use it to add to the dossiers I'm helping the states prepare. But if they keep coming in, I will keep preparing them. So no, there's a preferred deadline, but not an absolute one. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? Could you discuss again HLC involvement with the complaint process? HLC, I was at one of their meetings 2 weeks ago in Chicago, and we raised this issue, and they do not deal with student complaints. That is not the type of thing HLC does. HLC, maybe you can be more specific and let me know. Let me know a little bit more about what you're trying to get at, or even give me a call on that, and I will try to be more specific there. All right, I've got one down at the end here. How will SARA deal with institutions that partner and contract with third-party online for-profit vendors in their online programs? There is a section in SARA on that. And I am forgetting the details, but my guess is that Alan will chime in with that in any moment. And Alan is reiterating there is no connection between the SARA complaint process and HLC. Okay, good. And the person who asked that question is going to contact me. That's great. Let's see. Waiting for Alan to answer that other question. All right. What if, as some of the nonprofit colleges are pushing for, the Department of Ed revamps or is forced to drop the financial responsibility standards? Well, then we would have to redefine those standards in SARA. Two issues on that. If the state has a way that it evaluates the fiscal responsibilities score of its or status of its institutions, we will be able to look at something that considers comparable variables. I do know that I have heard, there is a report, and you know what, I'll put that on the website too. There is a report on an alternative set of metrics that I know is being recommended by the private institutions, and I know that that's being pushed for. That has not come up formally in any of our national or regional discussions, but again, we're always looking for good ideas, and I keep a file of them. So that would always be something. We would always find a way in SARA to be monitoring the financial responsibility of the institutions, because again, once you're going across state lines, you have to be that much more vigilant about how you are making sure that the institution can stay financially viable and deliver the product, the educational product, it has promised to its students. Okay, Alan, for the third-party question, see the frequently asked questions. You can use a third-party provider, but the provider can't sign for the state or the college. All right. Last question. Oh, wait a minute. And let's see. Most states don't allow a third-party provider to represent a college for purposes of authorization anyway, so that's the norm. All right, last question. Is there a section in the FAQs that addresses the role of the regional accreditors in addressing complaints vis-a-vis states? The issue is one of consumer protection versus academic program quality. I do not believe that that is handled in the FAQs, but again, this relationship between the accreditor and SARA is obviously something I need to handle. I need to get better materials on and better information on and make sure that I am presenting in a forthcoming webinar, and it is duly noted. So that's all our time. I appreciate everyone who has chimed in. If I haven't answered your question, please go ahead. Know that I've got them. I can begin to respond to them. I will post all the documents to which I have referred. I will update the ones that I can as those updates become available. Remember that the applications that are out there currently are drafts. The finals will be on December 2nd, and we can start taking applications December 2nd. I did see someone wanted ideas for sample legislation. The legislative stuff is a little bit harder to make sure that we are offering and not practicing law. So call me about that one too, and we will get that handled. The chat can remain open for another 15 minutes, but we have to go off of our live feed now. So do we just hang up? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.